Okay, let me introduce you our idea of invoice management tool for freelancers. Our idea is to make invoicing simple. First, to give a brief intro to our team. Our team is consists of 4 people, all from ISADI. My name is Hong Ze, and I'm from the Master of International Management, and 2 of them, Guige and Xiaonan, are from Master of Business Analytics, and also a teammate, Pietro, from Master in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. First, to give a outline of our project. First, me will introduce the overview of our project and overview of our tool, and give intro to our invoice management interface. And Xiaonan will introduce you our financial analysis interface and key challenges and learnings. And after the presentation, Guige will show you the demo of our project. First, that's why we want to do this project. Because according to the data generated from World Bank, there are around 1.56 billion freelancers in the world in this year, and it is estimated to grow to 1.8 billion in 3 years as a result of booming of gig economy. And also from the pie graph shown below, we can see that more than 50% of freelancers worked with client failed to pay. So like the invoice, the payments and management is very crucial for freelancers. So that's why we generate this idea of an integrated management tool for freelancers, for them to manage their invoices, and also they can do financial analysis in this platform. So this is the prototype of our application. So for example, if like freelancers named Web Hero, if they use our tool, so they in the interface, in the dashboard, there would be 2 buttons. One is for the function of invoice management, and another is for the financial analysis. So in the invoice management tool, they can add new customer if they have like new services, and they can also save and update invoice to the Excel, to the database, and also on local. And they can also create new invoice, and also they can search invoice which is existing in the database. So in the next interface of financial analysis, our user can do daily or monthly analysis of item, or also for each client to see what is their revenue and what is the cost and what the profits daily and monthly. So next, I will introduce our invoice management interface. So in the invoice management interface, we came up 3 scenarios for our user to meet their need. The first scenario is to create a new invoice for a new customer, and also second scenario is to create a new invoice for an existing customer. The third scenario is to search for an existing invoice and update the information. So in the first scenario, after clicking new invoice button, we can see there is a add button to add a new customer, and the user form add new customer will pop up. And after entering all the information that needed, a unique number will assign to this customer. And after putting all the details of the invoice, you can click save and update. So all this information of the invoice will be saved to our data set, which is our worksheet invoice list. And in the second scenario, we can create a new invoice for an existing customer, which is similar to the first scenario. But in this case, you don't need to add a new customer. You can just drop down the customer list and choose an existing customer. And also for the third, for existing invoice, you can enter the invoice number here, which is in the red line. So after this, all the information of this invoice will pop up, and you can modify all the details of invoice and save it to our database. So next, in order to indicate that the invoice is saved or updated, we came up with an idea of showing the message box of invoice saved successfully. So this is the code on the left, and this is how it works on the right. Also, we also have a button named Save as PDF to help our clients to save all this information or the invoice on local. So after clicking the Save as PDF button, the invoice, the PDF format will be saved automatically on local, and all the information will be installed. So next, I will give floor to Xiaonan to introduce the financial analysis.
So hi everyone, now I'm going to introduce you the financial analysis interface. So first, when you click on the button of financial analysis on the dashboard, it will pop out a user form where you can select which kind of financial analysis you want to see. So if you take a closer look at the form, you will have you choose either you can display this financial analysis by cluster name or item name or invoice status. And for all those three choices, you can display the metrics of revenue, cost, and profit. And also you can see it in daily manner or a monthly manner. So for cluster name, you can see that you can display the financial analysis by all customers or one specific customer. And as you can see in the graph on the right, after you select a customer or all customers, it will show a line chart of the totally amount that is caused by this customer. Here we use total revenue and total cost of this customer, and you can see the trend of this customer's the invoice. And also you can select by the item name. Here we have plenty of items, and you can see in the right chart that we display these items, invoices, all of the amounts, cost, and profit in a monthly manner, and you can see the trend. Finally, you can also view this with invoice status. You want to see either this invoice is unpaid or billed, and you can also see the trend easily in daily manner or in monthly manner. And the logic behind of creating such a financial analysis chart is that first we select and filter the data from the original full data sets based on the choices you made, either its cluster name, item name, or invoice status. After such a filtered data set is created, we will create a pivot table from that data set, which means we're gonna group some data, if you choose a cluster name, we're gonna group the data set by the cluster name. And then we will have some selected columns such as revenue, cost, profit is also based on the selection. And then we can also group the data if we choose monthly. So we're gonna group all the data in the same month so that the data can be presented in a monthly way. And after such a pivot table is created, we'll create a chart based on that pivot table. And you can see here we use a line chart, and you can display either one choices you have made or total 3 choices you have made with this pivot table. And finally, I'll introduce you the key challenges as learnings. So the first key challenges we have met is that the value of each cell might have a great importance to the backend logic of the whole functions. And if you modify one cell accidentally, it might destroy the whole structure of the backend functions and cause a lot of bugs. So the entire structure is actually very fragile. The second one is that every one of us have a MacBook. So it is very difficult for us to design the user form because MacBook doesn't allow user forms. The third one is that although sometimes our code works perfectly, but there are some very unexpected situations that we have met because the customer don't always act in our desired way. So we also have three key learnings from the challenges. The first one is because we use Microsoft Teams to work on this, but sometimes working on VBA with sharing documents is quite tricky and it doesn't update in time. So our solution is to divide the part in logical way so everyone can take his turn to work on it in a linear way. And the second one is to avoid the bots from the undesired user actions we mentioned above. So it's best to have more alpha user tests before we finally launch this program, because in that way you can see more unexpected way you haven't seen, so you can solve the problems in advance. Finally, although Mac cannot work with user form, but there are some alternatives that can mimic the user form action so that we can actually design and the test code without using a Windows computer. And here are our references. Thank you very much for listening. Do you have any questions?
Now I'm going to show you our live demo of the Invoice project. Now you're in the interface page. As you can see, we had two main functions here. The first one is invoice management. The second is the financial analysis. Most of the time, our user will interact with the first function, the invoice management function, where the user can generate new invoice, print it as PDF, then can send it over to the customers or search for an existing invoice and have a look at it. And for the financial analysis, the users can use this function to generate a graph to have a basic overview of how much he sell for the past month or for the past week and which item is most popular. Some information like that to have a summary of his business. So now first, let's have a look at the invoice management. We click on this button and we just jump to the invoice page. And as you can see, there are a couple of fields or elements here. So in the upper left is the logo. It's only an example. Users can put this company's logo and adjust here. And we had the customers, like this is the name, address, and city this invoice is going to sending to. And here is an invoice number. For each invoice, like we generate, every time we will assign a new and unique invoice ID to this invoice to make sure they're unique so that users can just search them in the future, make sure we can find it correctly. Also the status, they could be open, unpaid bill, and partial pay. And the invoice date is set by default yesterday. And we also had the dates when the item is selling, the description, quantity, price, total cost, something like that. Also, we had a couple of buttons we can interact. And if this is a new invoice, we can save it. But if it's an old invoice and want to make some modifications on it, we can just change some number here and update it. And the information will be updated in our database in the backend in the other sheets. And we can also generate a new invoice. We can also save it as PDF so that we can send it over to our customers. Also, we also had the subtotal, tax, and total amount of this invoice. Now let's try to just generate a new invoice here. Okay, so you can see most of the fields are clean, and the previous invoice number is 3, and this is a brand new invoice, so it was assigned a new invoice ID as 4. So the first thing we can do is we can add a customer name. We can just choose from the existing customer list. For example, we choose Leo, and the address and city will be automatically found here. And we can also type someone else who is not in this list. For example, we can type Jack, who is not in our current customer list. Enter, and we'll get an error, customer non-found, since this customer is not our list. So we can just add the information of this guy. So if we click on yes, we had the add new customer user form. So we can put his address here. For example, and city Barcelona, zip code. Let's just give it a try. Jack. Once we click on save, the information is input in here. And we can also have a look at our database. And if we go to the client list, we can see we just create a new record of the new user information in the last row. And for the next step, we can modify the status of this invoice as is a new one. We can set it as open. And the next step, we can just generate some input for the items. For example, we can say we sell something in last year in May 20. The item name, we can just choose some for our list. We had the information of the items in here. The user can just add items afterwards, and the table, the drop-down list will update automatically. And we just choose input the quantity of how much website UI we are selling, for example, 2, and the total number or total amount of the invoice is calculated automatically. Also, the total cost, we can add another one immediately. So let's say it's 15. The items will be ATI integration, quantity S1. So now we had a full invoice. So we can just save it. And we have such a message saying that the invoice is saved. If you want to check it, we can go to the invoice list. So this is the invoice we just created. The customer is Jack, status open with exact amount, cost, and net profits. So it's correct. Now let's see what other functions we are providing. We can save it as a PDF. We click on this, say as PDF. It will just say the invoice again to make sure everything is updated. And we wait a little bit. On your right side, you can see a new invoice is generated as a PDF file, and it was stored at the local folder where our invoice project Excel file is stored. And you can see the name is named as the customer name with the invoice ID. We have all the information in this PDF. And let's see what other functions we are providing. We also can have the search invoice. We can look for an existing invoice. Like let's say we can type search invoice 2. It already exists in our list. So we just type 2 and we get the existing invoice information from here. For example, if we want to change the status, now it's billed, we can just, or we can change the quantity or the total amount of this invoice. Now let's see, the total amount of this invoice is 3,850. We can just maybe modify this item, the quantity made it to 1. So the price will be changed to 2,040.75. And before we save this invoice, we can check now the current second invoice, the total sales is still 3,850. So once we click on save and we come here again, the amount is modified here as well. So we can see the update is working functionally. And I think that's all for this invoice page. And besides for adding customer by typing, we can just click on this button and it just get us the user form where we can type in the user information here. And now let's jump to our second function, is the financial analysis. As I mentioned before, the users can have a basic summary of his business. Now we have such a user form where the user can choose the metrics he want to observe. Like for example, we had a customer name here. These are the invoice lists in our customers. Also the items, we can choose different items where they sell. Also the invoice status. So now let's just, for example, we print all the items, total revenue, total cost, total profits. Now on our right side, we can have the basic overview of how the product is selling. And we can also modify this graph. We choose other things. Like for example, we just want to know how the customer name Guigo, this guy, and what is the total cost for our orders to this guy. Also choose the time frame as daily and confirm again. And you can see the change in the graph. And that's all for the demo part. Thank you.